Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, September 30th, we're sorting through quite a pile of news, sources detailing some really critical developments happening right now in El Salvador and, well, around the world too.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Absolutely. And our goal here isn't just to read headlines. We want to synthesize these fast-moving events, everything from, new health rules and big infrastructure plans to, frankly, a pretty scary pension situation and major global political moves. So by the end of this deep dive, hopefully you'll have the context you need. The why and the so what behind today's biggest stories. Tuesday, September 30, 2025. Welcome to the Noticias El Salvador SV podcast, a space for conversation and reflection, where we explore together current issues in El Salvador and around the world. Search this podcast on Google as Noticias El Salvador SV and you'll find many options. Or search on your favorite platform. You'll find the PayPal link in the content description of this podcast. Your contribution of at least $1, $2, or whatever connects us and is necessary to continue on these platforms. Okay, let's dive into the domestic scene first, starting with healthcare regulation, and there's a sort of interesting split happening here, isn't there?
Yeah, it's quite a contrast. On one hand, they're really tightening quality control for some of the most vulnerable people.
Right, the home health and elder care.
Exactly. Those services now need formal authorization from the Council of Health, the CSSP, and this is, it's a fundamental step, acknowledging that need for professional, regulated home care.
Which makes sense, given the reasons cited. The Health Council president mentioned unscrupulous persons offering services without being qualified.
And that's a huge risk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're letting someone into your home, trusting them with a relative. You need that assurance. So this CSSP requirement, it acts like a safety net.
It does. It's a necessary safeguard. But, like you said, there's the other side. While they're putting stricter rules on home care, they're drastically cutting the time it takes to authorize general private health services down to just 5 days.
5 days, that's fast.
Very fast. So it suggests a strategy. Be really careful where people are most vulnerable at home, but streamline things elsewhere. Cut the red tape to, boost the private sector.
Interesting balance. Okay, moving from policy to, actual concrete and steel. Big news on infrastructure.
Yes, the metrocable project. It's finally kicking off.
The Minister of Public Works, MOP, announced an October start. This could be huge for traffic congestion, couldn't it?
Potentially transformative, yeah. They've got a company contracted, and the timeline is set at 18 months.
So completion sometime in spring 2027, roughly.
That's the plan. But what really stood out to me, what suggests they're serious this time, is that part of the actual infrastructure, the physical components, are apparently already in the country.
Oh, okay. Why is that specific detail so important for a project like this?
Well, it cuts down major risks right from the start. Think about logistical problems, supply chain holdups.
Right, things getting stuck in customs or just not arriving.
Exactly. Big projects often stall for months waiting for specialized parts, having key components already here. That shows some serious advanced planning and procurement. It makes that 18-month target seem, a bit more credible.
That preparation feels even more crucial given what else is happening. The Environment Minister put out a pretty stark warning.
Yeah, about intense rains expected, especially in early October.
So you got this massive construction project starting just as severe weather is forecast to hit.
It's a challenging overlap, definitely. And it connects directly to other MOP work focused on safety. They're intervening on 14 critical slopes taludes in the Los Chorros area.
Los Chorros. That road's always a concern, isn't it?
It is. And our sources mentioned Carretera Los Chorros 2 years later, which kind of implies this has been an ongoing issue. These interventions aren't just routine maintenance, they're trying to prevent landslides during these heavy rains.
Okay, so it's like a two-front infrastructure effort then. Launching the future system, the metrocable, while actively defending existing vital roads from immediate weather threats.
Precisely. It's long-term vision meeting immediate crisis management, all under MOP.
Okay, let's shift gears now to security and the justice system. Some really significant updates here.
Yes, starting with some international recognition, albeit conditional. The U.S. acknowledged El Salvador's significant efforts against human trafficking.
That's important, diplomatically speaking.
It is, especially considering the U.S. stance on local gangs as terrorist groups. But, the U.S. also noted there are still deficiencies that need work. So, progress, but not mission accomplished yet.
And the recent sentences handed down domestically certainly show a tough stance. Some of these numbers are just Staggering. 82 years for a massacre in Santa Anita.
Yeah, these sentences are sending a clear message about zero tolerance for extreme violence. But maybe even more revealing about the fight against organized crime are the sentences for the migrant traffickers. 55 and 77 years.
And the detail there, charging $12,000 per person to get them to the U.S.
That figure just shows you the kind of money involved, the massive profit motive driving these dangerous networks, a $12,000 price tag per person. Imagine the scale. So those long sentences are aimed at dismantling that whole criminal business model.
Right. And we also saw the maximum penalty given in that awful feminicide case involving a child in La Campanera. Again, maximum deterrence seems to be the goal for extreme violence.
It appears so. And connecting back to the overall strategy, there was an editorial perspective mention emphasizing that the fight against gangs like MSN18 needs to be permanent and forceful.
Reinforcing the state's position.
Exactly. And it's not just the big cases. Local work continues. There was that slightly unusual case in San Miguel.
Oh, the delivery driver.
Yeah, a guy caught posing as a delivery driver, but he was actually transporting marijuana.
It shows how crime adapts, trying to blend into legitimate activities.
So vigilance at all levels, from the major trafficking rings down to street-level dealing disguised as gig work.
That seems to be the approach, continuous pressure.
Okay, so we've talked about these pretty significant wins in the justice system, delivering immediate results for safety. But now we need to turn to the economy, where some really heavy long-term pressures are building.
That's a perfect way to put it. There's definitely a shadow looming. Looking ahead, the government's budgetary policy actually signals they know they need more money. They're aiming to seek increased revenue in 2026. Which could mean what? Higher taxes, better collection, more borrowing.
It could be any or all of those, but the core message is current income isn't enough for what's coming. They're bracing for future financial constraints.
And in the meantime, ordinary people are feeling the squeeze right now, aren't they?
Absolutely. We saw reports about insufficient production of beans.
A basic staple.
Exactly. A deficit there means prices go up for something fundamental. And then on top of that, fuel prices are increasing this fortnight.
Ouch. So food costs more because of shortages, and getting anywhere costs more because of fuel.
It's a double whammy, especially for lower and middle-income families. A real short-term inflationary pinch.
Amidst all that, though, there is one specific investment plan for the future. A $2 million boost for the UES, the University of El Salvador, budget in 2026.
Yeah, that's important. Investing in higher education, even when finances are tight elsewhere, is crucial for long-term development. It's about building human capital, research capacity. It shows a commitment beyond just managing the immediate crises.
Okay, but now, let's talk about that huge fiscal shadow you mentioned earlier, the pension crisis. This is where the numbers get, frankly, mind-boggling.
They really do. This isn't just a problem, it's potentially an existential financial threat. We need to grasp the scale here, the actuarial deficit for pensions. It could exceed $25 billion.
$25 billion. How does that compare to, say, the whole economy?
Well, that's the scary part. The country's entire GDP is somewhere around $35 billion. So you're talking about an unfunded promise, a debt that's worth nearly 3/4 of everything the country produces in a year.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's a promise the state simply can't afford to keep right now. And have past attempts to fix this worked?
Not effectively, no. Our analysis indicates the reforms made so far haven't stopped this state debt from growing. They were more like adjustments around the edges, tweaking contribution rates, shifting funds maybe.
Yeah.
But they didn't tackle the core structural problems, which means any new reform has to be much deeper and probably much more politically painful.
And one of those core issues is retirement age,
Yeah.
right? El Salvador's is quite low compared to others in the region.
Yes, and that low age just makes the system run out of money faster. People contribute for fewer years and draw benefits for many more years. And our sources note the IMF, back in 2021, specifically suggested raising the retirement age for women.
Why women specifically?
Likely due to longer life expectancy, actuarially speaking. They draw benefits for longer on average, which puts more strain on the system at the current retirement age.
So what's the likely fix needed now? How much does the age need to go up?
The general thinking seems to be that any real reform has to raise the retirement age by, say, 3 to 5 years. It's politically difficult, obviously, but mathematically...
It extends the time people pay in.
Exactly. It's almost a non-negotiable step towards long-term solvency.
But the retirement age is only one part of it. The other massive issue is who's actually paying into the system.
Precisely. And this might be the most critical structural weakness right now. Only 27% of the active working population currently saves for retirement through the formal system.
Only 27%. So nearly 3 out of 4 workers are outside of it.
Think about that, yeah. It means the entire weight of funding current retirees and that massive future debt rests on this incredibly narrow base of contributors.
And that reflects the huge informal economy, doesn't it?
Directly. The informal sector provides jobs, yes, but it essentially starves the formal pension system of the cash it desperately needs to even begin tackling that $25 billion hole. You just can't sustain a system like this with so few people paying in.
We also saw a note about the minimum pension itself. It's been raised 8 times in 25 years. Is that good news or bad news?
It's complicated. On one hand, yes, it shows an effort to keep up with the cost of living for retirees. But on the other hand, needing 8 increases in 25 years tells you that inflation has consistently eroded the value of that pension.
So it's always playing catch up.
Constantly. And while those increases are socially necessary, they also add to the state's overall bill, especially if the funding isn't sustainable. It's a difficult cycle.
And while El Salvador wrestles with designing this huge necessary reform, the international community is watching. The IMF hasn't set a date yet for publishing its big study on the pension system.
No defined date. And that delay just adds to the uncertainty. The IMF report is expected to be, the big international benchmark, the roadmap for fixing this. Without it, the government is kind of operating in limbo under intense pressure, trying to figure out how deep the cuts or changes need to be.
It really paints a picture of immense domestic economic pressure, from daily costs right up to this enormous long-term pension liability. Okay, let's hold that thought as we transition to the global stage. Tuesday, September 30, 2025. Welcome to the Noticias El Salvador SV podcast, a space for conversation and reflection, where we explore together current issues in El Salvador and around the world. Search this podcast on Google as Noticias El Salvador SV, and you'll find many options, or search on your favorite platform. You'll find the PayPal link in the content description of this podcast. Your contribution of at least $1, $2, or whatever connects us and is necessary to continue on these platforms. All right, shifting focus now from those heavy domestic economic realities to the equally intense world of international politics and diplomacy, starting in the Middle East. Yeah, the big headline here is the ultimatum from former President Trump regarding his Gaza peace proposal. He gave Hamas a very tight deadline, 3 or 4 days to respond.
And the warning was pretty blunt.
Extremely blunt. Failure to comply would lead to a sad end, was the quote. So this isn't negotiation anymore. It's high-pressure, time-limited diplomacy with explicit, severe consequences attached to saying no.
And this is all happening during the controlled chaos of the UN General Assembly week in New York.
Absolutely. You had, 89 heads of state, 43 heads of government, all crammed into Midtown Manhattan.
Imagine the traffic. Trump, Sanchez from Spain, Netanyahu.
Total gridlock. It's that annual spectacle of global power converging on essentially one city block.
And speaking of Netanyahu, his speech defending actions in Gaza seems to have been quite controversial. The description said he spoke amidst protests and, crucially, in a nearly empty room.
That detail, the empty room, is incredibly symbolic, isn't it?
Yeah. What does that signal?
It signals a major diplomatic snub. It suggests many countries deliberately chose not to attend, highlighting just how isolated Israel might be currently within the UN framework over the Gaza situation.
And on a lighter note, apparently a broken escalator at the UN gave Trump some political ammunition.
Yeah, classic Trump. He's always been critical of the UN's bureaucracy, and, well, a broken escalator just plays right into that narrative about institutional inefficiency. A small thing, but perfect political fodder for him.
It's always a week of contrasts, isn't it?
Yeah.
Leaders debating global conflicts in New York, while daily life elsewhere looks very different.
Very different indeed. Look at Cuba, for instance. The reports paint a grim picture. Widespread blackouts, Apagón, severe water shortages, trash piling up in Havana. That's not just inconvenience, it's systemic failure impacting basic quality of life.
And back in the U.S., a significant policy shift within the military.
Right, the U.S. Army announcing it wants to recover the male standard, specifically saying no fat or bearded men.
That's quite a specific directive. What's behind that, do you think?
It could be a few things. Maybe a renewed focus on operational readiness, physical fitness standards, or maybe it's a reaction against perceived looser standards recently. The no beards part is definitely a return to stricter, more traditional grooming codes, emphasizing uniformity.
Interesting. And down in Florida, a political gesture solidifying a legacy.
Yes. The state approving land in Miami for Trump's presidential library. That's a significant move, physically embedding his legacy in a politically crucial state like Florida.
Okay, let's turn to regulations and migration. A small but notable change for travel to Europe.
Yeah, no more passport stamps, apparently. It signals that shift towards digital border control systems, more efficient, perhaps, but also means more reliance on biometric data, digital tracking.
Meanwhile, the human side of migration remains tragic. The death of a Mexican national after being shot at an ICE facility in Dallas.
That's bound to intensify debates around detention conditions, safety protocols, use of force. A really serious incident.
And we're also following specific cases involving Salvadorans. Kilmar Abrigo Garcia.
Right, he was moved to a detention center in Pennsylvania. But the key development is a judge stepping in to halt his deportation until October. That gives him crucial time to actually pursue his asylum claim.
Shows the importance of that judicial check.
Absolutely. It ensures due process doesn't get short-circuited.
And then a completely different story, a success story. Gabriela Hueso, a Salvadoran immigrant making waves in U.S. influencer marketing.
Yeah, she talked about securing a place at the table of the great global brands. It's a powerful counter-narrative, isn't it?
It really is. Shows the entrepreneurial drive and economic contribution moving beyond just the legal struggles we often focus on.
Exactly. Using cultural insight to succeed in a global market.
And finally, a significant political shift down in Chile.
Yes, they approved reforms to limit voting rights for foreigners, and perhaps more dramatically, they're bringing back mandatory voting.
Mandatory voting, with fines if you don't participate.
That's right. It's a major step to combat voter apathy, trying to force higher turnout. Pairing that with limiting foreign voting really refocuses electoral power onto permanent citizens. It's a systemic change in who votes, and ensuring more of those eligibles actually do.
Okay, let's lighten things up slightly maybe and look at some of the more intriguing cultural and social stories making news, starting with something really unique from Nepal.
Yeah, this is fascinating. A 2-year-old girl has been proclaimed the new living goddess, the Kumari.
Living goddess.
So venerated by both Hindus and Buddhists, actually. She's a really important, unifying spiritual figure. She holds the role until puberty, then the search begins again.
Wow. Choosing a 2-year-old, it really underscores how strong tradition remains there.
Absolutely, a living link to ancient practices.
Okay, shifting gears dramatically to the world of frangula celebrity news and gossip. It's been a big week for relationships.
It seems so. First, the split between Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban after 19 years.
19 years is a long time, especially in that world.
It really is. End of an era for a major power couple.
But then, new beginnings too. Selena Gomez and Benny Blanco got married recently.
Right. So love is still in the air for some. And we got some rather colorful anecdotes from the past.
What?
Like Nicolas Cage apparently throwing a massive engagement ring into the sea after a fight with Lisa Marie Presley on a yacht.
Seriously?
That's the story. Just pure celebrity drama and excess, isn't it?
It certainly is. And we also heard from Jennifer Lopez reflecting on her past divorce from Ben Affleck.
Yeah, she actually said it was maybe the best thing that could have happened to her, that it helped her grow personally.
It's interesting when you hear that kind of reflection turns gossip into something a bit more relatable, maybe?
I think so. A bit of perspective on resilience.
And finally, Bad Bunny. He was in the news for his Super Bowl gig, but also for admitting regret over some kind of aesthetic procedure.
Yeah, I called it the worst mistake he'd made. It kind of humanizes these huge global stars, doesn't it? Shows they have insecurities too.
Definitely. Okay, let's pivot to sports now, and some unusual strategies being employed.
You must mean Mikel Arteta at Arsenal. His plan to use military pilots.
Yeah, military pilots to help footballers communicate better. That sounds unconventional.
It does, but there's a logic. Military pilots are experts in clear, concise communication under extreme pressure.
Okay, I see the connection.
Arteta's thinking maybe he can transfer those skills, those protocols, from a life or death environment to the high-pressure world of Premier League football. Get players talking effectively on the pitch.
Interesting experiment. Locally, in Salvadoran soccer, some positive news for officials.
Yes, referee Ivan Barton got assigned to the Campeones Cup final. That's great recognition for him and for Salvadoran officiating.
Good to see. And the Federation Fesfoot is taking action on racism.
Yeah, launching a campaign after complaints from Surinamese players recently. Taking a firm public stance is really important there.
Absolutely. In the league itself, Aguila finally broke a bad losing streak.
Relief for their fans, I'm sure. But then there was that controversy with Jairo Enriquez.
Playing for Aguila even though he was called up for the national team.
Exactly, the classic club versus country dilemma. And it apparently messed up the schedule, forcing the big match, Aguila versus FAS, the National Classic, to be reprogrammed.
Always causes headaches.
Yeah.
Okay, and let's wrap this section with a quick health tip that popped up in the sources, something about knees.
Yeah, just some practical, science-backed advice on strengthening knees to prevent future pain.
Seems important. We all rely on our knees.
Totally. And they often get neglected in exercise routines. The advice is basically strengthen the muscles around the knee, quads, hamstrings. It's maybe the best way to avoid chronic pain and mobility issues down the road. Simple stuff, but potentially huge long-term benefit.
Good reminder. Hashtag tag summary conclusion.
Okay, so pulling all these threads together from today's sources, what's the big picture? Well, in El Salvador, you see the government fighting on really three main fronts simultaneously.
What?
First, there's that regulatory push, tightening standards for home healthcare to protect people, but also aggressively cutting red tape elsewhere for business.
That contrast we talked about.
Exactly. Second, there's the immediate infrastructure battle, launching the huge metrocable project, while at the same time scrambling to reinforce those 14 slopes in Los Coros before the heavy rains hit. It's future building versus immediate disaster prevention.
And the third front.
That's the quiet one, the long-term fiscal battle, the pension crisis. That potential $25 billion deficit is just enormous, and past fixes haven't worked. The low retirement age, and especially that tiny 27% contribution rate, that's the core structural weakness casting a huge shadow over everything else.
A massive financial challenge.
Absolutely. And internationally, we saw high-stakes diplomacy with Trump's ultimatum, Netanyahu's isolation at the UN, shifts in U.S. military policy, the ongoing migrant situations. It's just a really complex and urgent picture across the board.
So for you, our listener, trying to make sense of all this, what's the main takeaway? I think it's how interconnected everything is.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Think about it. The speed of that big infrastructure project, the metrocable, is directly threatened by the weather forecast. And the government's very real, very visible success in the justice system, those tough sentences against gangs.
Immediate security wins.
Are happening alongside this slow burn financial crisis with the pensions, which could destabilize things just as much in the long run. They're winning the immediate battles, maybe, but that slow financial pressure is immense. Tuesday, September 30, 2025. Welcome to the Noticias El Salvador SV podcast, a space for conversation and reflection where we explore together current issues in El Salvador and around the world. Search this podcast on Google as Noticias El Salvador SV, and you'll find many options. Or search on your favorite platform. You'll find the PayPal link in the content description of this podcast. Your contribution of at least $1, $2, or whatever connects us and is necessary to continue on these platforms. So as we finish up this deep dive, here's something to think about, connecting those different timelines. El Salvador is showing real strength in tackling crime, achieving significant judicial victories that boost public safety right now. But can that success, that feeling of security, ultimately outweigh the massive long-term risk for a potential $25 billion pension? Is it possible to win the security war but still face a kind of financial defeat down the road?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that will absolutely shape the country's future.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the headlines of September 30th, 2025.
We'll catch you next time.